or the depth of her gaze. But her bared nape truly was pleasing when she lowered her head, resolute when she'd stood tall and centered, and magnetic when softly bending and twisting during the touch of the hand. And how sparkling her eyes were underneath her perfectly symmetrical eyebrows. Her eyes seemed ready to sympathize with the most heartbreaking of sights, and were as dark as the undiscovered ocean deep. Her skin below her ear to cheek was pink, which made her seem shy, but the straight and narrow nose between her eyes helped overcome that impression by giving her face an air of intelligence. It was a striking combination. Around her lips, which were neither thin nor plump, were soft, white hairs, finer than a hint of sprouts in spring, a mouth so lovely that no amount of silliness could make her anything less than embraceable. And yet, that loveliness was not the only reason she exuded charm. It flowed from how she maintained the character of her neat and measured walk, conveying a sense of confidence despite the crush of attention. She made no sign of acknowledging the people's leers and stares. Her walk was clearly distinct from the walk of normal Korean women, who went about in a slight bow with their faces peeking out from the long coats modestly covering their heads. The woman's walk never wavered in its perfect balance, even for a moment. She didn't bother with such conceits as pretending to stare out at the ocean to avoid the gazes that were full of suspicion. Her shoulders were spread wide, and the way in which she advanced gave a sense of her being strong enough to walk through any situation that met her way. The provocative quality of this walk was softened by the depths of her gaze, the beauty of the nape of her neck, and the loveliness that flowed from her face. If anything, her steady poise in the face of their scrutiny made them sigh and turn away toward the ocean. This lovely woman, taking in the view, was not aware that only 10 years ago, before the signing of the Chemelpo Treaty, the harbour surrounded by low-lying hills had been nothing more than a quiet village of 10 or so thatched roof houses. As is often the case in life, change came only when forced. The tiny fishing village, surrounded by water on almost every side, changed rapidly after the signing of the treaty. A Japanese concession was established, followed by that of China and other nations, with their businesses popping up everywhere in the once sleepy environs. Soon, 1 out of every 10 persons in Chemelpo were either Japanese or Chinese, and at this point in time, no one knew for sure, yet, whether they would breathe life or sadness into this small seaside town. She thought to herself that it was good weather to set sail in, but quickly dismissed the thought. A district official, tasked by the Board for Diplomacy and Trade's Cho Byung-shik with seeing off Victor, had greeted them with the advice that it was unlucky to say good weather for sailing when about to board a ship. Commenting on good weather foreshadowed storms in the voyage ahead. Among the people seeing them off were harbour officials and French missionaries. There were also French nuns who had settled in Korea. There wasn't a single tall building or large ship in sight. The harbour was an international port, but looked no different from any local pier. The waves near the shore were as calm as those farther out. Among the low roofs were the occasional white European-style habitations. The eaves of the thatched roof houses seemed to overlap in the absence of tall buildings. Sunlight seeped between them. The woman, who had once danced for the king and embroidered tortoise patterns in the palace, was now soaking herself in the warm light of the harbour. The eaves of the palace buildings had been high and wide, almost touching each other, allowing only shade underneath. The journey to the harbour had been a constant meeting of and parting from things she had never before seen, land never before stepped on, and people never before met. Where was it that he'd said those words? The day they left the capital, the company had spent a night at an inn in the country. The inn, which was surrounded by a driftwood fence, had 12 ponies. The ponies puffed, their nostrils quivering, as if impatient to run the fields, but they too were enclosed by the fence. When darkness fell, the cries of the mountain creatures carried into the windowless rooms. Sometimes a kind word can encapsulate love like a seed buried in the soil. In that mountain inn, the former palace dancer Yi Jin heard the French legate Victor call out to her in Korean, "My angel." She was more surprised by his unaccented pronunciation than by his calling her an angel. Victor practiced his Korean when he could, but there had always been something missing in it, his words scattering in the air. Crossing the ocean to his country...